Hi guys, so today I'm going to be going through a few books that I'm hoping to read during this quarantine. A little update since the last video. I went back to school and then we got kicked off campus, so I'm back at home again. And I finished Way of Kings. So the first book on my list is Words of Radiance, which is the next in the Stormlight Archives series, and today I'm wearing my Mistborn shirt, which is from Brandon Sanderson's website, and I am about 132 pages into Words of Radiance. It's a little bit longer than Way of Kings by 100 pages or so. I have the next one after this, Oathbringer, which I will be diving into once I finish this one. Hopefully I should have them all done by the time the fourth one comes out in November, which we just have a release date for that one. And so the next book is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. I bought 3 Trollope novels last spring, and just now I'm getting around to them. They are really beautiful editions. And I've seen Dr. Thorne on one of the masterclass, or not, what's that called? Masterpiece Theater. I think they did Dr. Thorne, and they mentioned Trollope, and so I really liked that story, so I decided to get 3 of them, including Dr. Thorne, but I'm going to read The Warden first because it's a little bit of a shorter read. The next one is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Now, I've started reading this one today, and I am 1 chapter into it, and I already love it. I have a feeling I'm going to be buying a lot more of his books and reading them. This is the first one that I'm reading by him. It's a little bit of a long one to start with, but I think it'll be well worth it. So I'm very excited about this one. And then the 4th book is the Conan Doyle's Best Books, Volume 1. I have 3 volumes, and this is the stories of Sherlock Holmes, which all 3 of them are Sherlock Holmes, and I had picked these up a little bit ago at a thrift store, and they're just beautiful old copies of these books with the nice Sherlock on the front. And I'm very, very excited to give these a read. I have to read them delicately since they're so old. They're definitely not a lay in bed and read. They're a sit by your window kind of read because they need to be handled with care. So those are the 3 that I'm going to be focusing on. I'm hoping to get through more than that, but for now, those are the 3 because American Gods is, I think, 600 and some pages, 750 pages actually, and then Words of Radiance is 1300, I believe. So those 2 alone will take me a little bit to get through, but I'm very excited because I love Brandon Sanderson, as we know, and I'm starting to love Neil Gaiman, but I'm really kind of excited about this quarantine because it's giving me time to write, and it's giving me time to read, and I have one of the longest to-be-read lists ever. I have this bookshelf, which is about 5 feet tall, and these are all my classics, and then some of my older books, like Rick Riordan's down here, and, like The Hunger Games, Cornelia Funke, Artemis Fowl, all the things I read when I was in middle school and elementary school. And then I have all of my reading that I've done being in the honors college. So we have the Aeneid, King Lear, Midsummer Night's Dream, Plato, all sorts of just the great books. And then I have some from my writing minor. So I have like the poetry of Robert Frost, and like one just anthology of poetry. And then I have some other classics that I've just picked up along the way, like Trollope and Conan Doyle, Anna Green Gables, some Chekhov. I was in a Chekhov play, so I have that script. And then I also have a complete work of a bunch of his plays. So some of them I'm probably going to go back to soon, but I'm sticking with fantasy right now because I'm trying to write, and since I write fantasy and sci-fi, I needed to kind of focus on the stuff that I write. But yeah, so all those are on this shelf, and then over on the other side of my bed, we have my smaller bookshelf, which is stacked double back, and that's all of my fantasy. Well, most of it. Brandon Sanderson has his own shelf up above my bed, and The Wheel of Time is down in my nightstand at the very front, and then I have a bunch of mystery novels behind that. So that's kind of how my books are set up, and then I have a couple more in the trunk at the foot of my bed, and then a couple romance novels on the shelf by my door. I have a lot of books, not enough space for them, so I might end up moving some of them down to the front room because right now we don't have a lot of books down there, and at least my great books I could probably put down there because they look a little bit more like parlor reading, but nobody actually uses that room other than to play the piano, so my brother said it was fine, so I might just do that. But I also love having my books in my room because then they can whisper to me and give me inspiration as I'm writing my stories. So yeah, those are my reads. I loved Way of Kings. At the beginning, Kaladin was my favorite, and I just didn't want to read anything other than his chapters. And I was like, kind of not feeling Dalinar, and Shallan was... It took me a while to like really appreciate Shallan, and it took me a while to even get to know Jasnah, but I love Jasnah. And I was really impressed with Dalinar by the end of the book. Sanderson did such a great job setting him up to be a successful character later on, and I think that's really what he seems to be doing. Is the first book was about Kaladin, and then he's going to go on and hopefully focus on the two others, Shallan and Dalinar, in later books, which I think Words of Radiance is supposed to be Shallan's book because it starts kind of with her, although it does start with Jasnah, but I have a feeling it's going in that direction, and it's focusing on her more than it did on Kaladin. But I still love Kaladin, and I'm hoping that he will still be in the books a lot. But yeah, the world building is absolutely insane. I already loved Brandon Sanderson's style from Mistborn, which is my entry point into his stuff. So I knew that I would like it once I could get into it, but again, it took me a little bit to get into it because it's a little bit of an intimidating read, being like 1,250 pages. That's a lot. I mean, I didn't realize that I read such large books until that book, because Mistborn I read on my Kindle the first time. I think I've read it 6 or 7 times since, but the first time it was on my Kindle, so I was just reading, and I didn't really notice how long it was, and it's not nearly as long as Way of Kings. But, like, I was looking at my bookshelf, and I'm like, okay, like, for example, yeah, let's see how long Inkheart is. I read this when I was in elementary school, and it's over 500 pages. So, and this is, I think, the shortest out of that trilogy. I was reading really thick books since I was, like, a child, so I don't know why I was so intimidated by The Way of Kings, but I was for some reason, and I got 50 pages into it, and it just wasn't, like, settling, and I think it's because it has such a steep, like, it's like you don't know anything in the beginning. It just drops you in, everything's going on, and it's a completely different world than you've ever known before. And so I got to page 50, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. And then I sat on it for a year or two, maybe a little bit longer than that, and I had stuck it in my nightstand, and it was there. Every time I'd open it up to, like, get a notebook or something, it was just sitting there. I was like, yeah, I'll come back to it. Yeah, I'll come back to it. And then, I don't know why, this year, I was like, you know what? It's time. Because the thing is, I love Brandon Sanderson, and every time I talk to someone, they're like, oh, you read Way of Kings, and they just assumed that I'd read all of the Stormlight archives that were out. And I was like, no, I've read Elantris, and I've read Steelheart, and I've read Mistborn, and A lot of the younger reads, I would really call them, although Mistborn's kind of in between. And I really didn't get into Sanderson's work until 9th grade, maybe. So I got tired of people being like, oh, have you read Way of Kings? And having to say no. They're like, oh, you're not really a Brandon Sanderson fan if you haven't read the Stormlight Archives. And I was like, well, I'm a fan of his work. So I decided to read it, and now I'm even more obsessed than I was before. And I see that as a good thing because it helps inform my writing. It helps make me a better writer. And hopefully someday whenever I publish, people will see all of the reading and all of the thinking that goes into everything, because his stories make me think and they make me keep turning the page, which is exactly what you need in a book. And I have a feeling Neil Gaiman is going to be another one of those influences in my writing, which I'm very happy about because he seems to be a fantastic writer. But as a writer, I have to think about it, because as I read, I want my writing to be like what I'm reading. But the thing is, as I'm drafting novels, my first drafts aren't going to be anywhere near where their finished product is. And that's one of the things that, as a young writer, I mean, I'm only 21, so Sanderson didn't publish until he was 29. And he'd written, I think, 8 books before then. That's insane to me. Now you have, outliers, well, Brandon Sanderson is an outlier in and of himself. But then you have even more so, Aragon, Christopher Paolini. That's not how it works for everybody. And as a young writer, it's very difficult because you're comparing yourself to the people that you admire and you want your work to be like them. But that's not how it is. It's just not. You don't start off writing and spinning gold. And that's a hard thing to think about. And imposter syndrome is real. I'm a big reader and I love writing, but everybody suffers from imposter syndrome. They think, oh, I'll never be like this person, and they're going to see me as the fraud that I am, that I'm not really a writer. But it doesn't matter if you're published. It doesn't matter. The only thing that makes you a writer or doesn't make you a writer is that you write. If you write, you are a writer. And don't let anybody tell you that you're not, because they're wrong. Writing is something so incredibly personal, even when you're writing something like science fiction and fantasy, especially when you are, because you have to mold those characters with things from yourself. Everything's coming from your own brain. And that can be really, really scary. It's really scary to open up and to be almost intimate in the way that you share yourself. And the best writers are the ones who are able to do that. It takes maturity, it takes growth, and it takes a lot of bad writing to get to the point where you can publish. These are things I'm telling myself every single day. So it's not me talking as a author who's already published and knows exactly what to do, because nobody knows exactly what to do. I'm just trying to tell you what I'm trying to tell myself. So that got a little more deep than I thought it was going to, because this was just supposed to be me talking about books that I'm going to read, but there we have it. So my list is Words of Radiance, The Warden by Anthony Trollope, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and the first volume of Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes tales. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for hanging out, and I hope you guys all stay safe and healthy during this quarantine and this whole crazy mess of a world. Who even needs fantasy when we're living in the end times? Have a good day and have a good week, and I will see you next time.